I was thinking about the the progress of science in the world, right? Specifically because I am, like everybody else, fascinated by the accomplishment of the scientific revolution, right? Which which taught us one thing really, right? To ask why something is. And recently, I've been reading the work of Walter Longo, right? Who is this Italian biochemist who discovers that, you can reactivate stem cells in your body by um, putting your body in a fast mimicking state, right? Now, you're thinking, of course, that every culture has known that going back to the Egyptians. What are you talking about? We didn't need Walter Longo to come along and show us anything, right? And that is wrong. I'm not going to get into why it's wrong because that's not what this video is about. What it's about is that a man manages to show us not only that grandma was right, but why grandma was right. And while he was at it, he made it accessible so that we could decouple all that required and demanded religion, faith, and belief to survive this process of transformation, which is why fasting for the most part comes to us through the Judeo-Christian, basically through religious channels, right? Because that is how you endured 40 days in the desert or wherever else the Spirit struck you, right? But the question that struck me particularly concerning his work was the very nature of science, right? I thought that something at the heart of the problem had been illumined by his discovery, right? So what is science, right? Science is this capacity to pay attention and to record your findings. That's all it is, right? it's it's really no more than that. A scientist, from the mathematician to the theoretical physicist, that's all you do. You pay attention and you record your findings. And so I was asking myself, right? I go up in Africa, I go up in Ghana. I was asking myself that, if science is this simple principle of paying attention to a problem and recording your observation, and of course, the making that into a system of continuous refinement, right? And I asked myself, why then why then was it Yamanaka who finds that you can take a skin cell and you can mess around with with the Yamanaka factors, and then you would create a stem cell out of it, right? Why didn't we discover it at KNUST? And like everything else, right? This is just a man thinking out loud. Um, and it occurred to me that it was because science, right? Science is this objective process of discovery, but at the same time, science is a cult, right? Science is a cult. And a cult is only one step removed from religion, right? So you could say science is a religion, right? And it occurred to me that the reason that science has not brought the same benefits to some extent to the man, right, on the African savannah as it has brought to the Germans, to the Dutch, to the English, to Russia, to China, to Japan, is because we don't believe in the God of science, right? This is what I mean. So the man, he says, go out into all the world, right? And baptize in name of Father, Son, and Spirit. Why? Because the privileges of sonship are withheld from them that are without initiation, which is to say that the fruits of the tradition are inaccessible to those who will not bend their knee. Now, there's something interesting here, right? What I'm trying to get at is that the African, at the point of quintessence, at the point of what is at the very center of him, it it's wary of the God of science, but it's not surrendered to him, right? So when the man came along, he showed us that Confornochi was not the man, right? That there was something, some order that transcended his power, and this power came to be feared and dreaded, right? It was the power of the devouring beast, right? The serpent of metal, right? Rudyard Kipling, right? If you are if you're in a village in India and you see a train coiling its way towards you, you imagine that that is a serpent of metal, right? And you might still go to your temple and burn incense and leave fruits and food for your deity, but now, right? Now you begin to wonder, right? Like Eve in the garden, what if there's more? And so what I think has happened in Africa is that we dread the power of science, we stand in awe of it, but we don't believe. And because we don't believe, we haven't been properly catechized in its formulations, right? So you end up with a tool that you cannot put to use because you don't believe in it. Because that's all it is, right? That's all it is. You could go to Legon right now, and the reason we give Yamanaka the Nobel Prize is that if you go to Legon right now and you go to the Department of Biology and then you take a skin cell and then you have the right instrumentation, that you could read Yamanaka's published work and you could turn a skin cell down in some village or town, wherever you are in the world, if you follow his methodology. So why are we not doing it, right? Why are we not making the grand and great discoveries? That's the question I'm trying to address. Why do we have universities going back 60, 70, 80, 100 years now in Africa where I'm from that is not discovering anything, right? It's a really interesting question. We don't discover anything. We have not discovered anything. Now, of course, I'm not saying that we can't. I'm saying that we haven't. I'm trying to diagnose why we have not. And I think it's because there's something, right? I recently heard the story of a man who is a professor in um, biology someplace, and he goes to the doctor in West Africa and Ghana, and the doctor says that you have diabetes and you're gonna have to take these drugs, and then he says that, well, I'm gonna go to my traditional medicine, and I have these herbs that I'm gonna gather, and I feel like they're gonna cure me, and then he goes into shock and he dies, right? Now, the reason that question is relevant is that this was a man who had faked belief in the traditions of a religion that he no longer believed in, that he had never believed in. And so I think that that's what's at the heart of it, right? Because, we have incredible minds who come into the West, and they are part of, fantastic, incredible scientific endeavors that really, find amazing things. And what's staggering for me is, and I think that we can trace it through the lens of how other cultures, right, who are not, of whose heritage scientism, if you will, was not a part of it at the inception, like the Japanese. The Japanese fascinate me because you have these people who are isolated and they live on an island and there's nothing but salt water. Okay, these people have like what, a 70-mile stretch of land in any direction, and they would hit salt water, and they become, if you will, one of the most lauded people in the world. And why do they do that? I think that part of it is why Japan is hemorrhaging spiritually right now. I think that when a people begin to believe in science, what happens is that they have to kill their gods, right? They have to, because Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is God alone, right? Muhammad says the same thing, and I'm sure if you read the Shinto text, they will say the same thing, right? The problem is that our gods are always fighting, right? Our gods are very jealous. All of our gods are very jealous. And so you have the God of science, and it says that if you will bow to me, if you will reap all the treasures of jet engines and space stations and Salk vaccines, and all that appears to the untrained mind as veritable miracles, that you can have the whole world. And Europe was the first one to capitulate, right? Europe capitulated. Europe saw the treasures that science had to offer, and he said, whoa, whoa. Now this here is God. This right here, that is God. And so Europe bent the knee and said, hail science, right? And to some extent, Asia is capitulating, right? And so I think that it'll be interesting to see going forward what happens to the cult of science in Africa. I'm really interested in it because here you have 54 billion people, and presently, I mean, of course they are not. They also have their Einsteins, and they're going to have their Schrodingers, and they're going to have their Bohr, and whoever the hell else you want to name, and their Wittgensteins and their Kants. They're gonna come. It'll take them some time. But what becomes of the man, right? What becomes of the man when he surrenders the gods of his ancestors for God whom he has not known, right? I think that there's this spiritual question of the heart of the scientific process. And because, you go to Japan right now, and we know it, right? One of the highest levels of suicide in the world. And what has happened to these people, right? I mean, these were samurai warriors, right? Going back thousands of generations, a very strong and spirited people. I think that they traded their souls for mess of pottage, right? Um, isn't it funny how other people's words creep into your language? So what's interesting to me ultimately is how we're going to, as Africans, as an African, navigate this space of scientism. I think that we also are going to capitulate because science is a terrible master, right? And this power is so overwhelming that it's going to take more courage than any man has to withstand it, right? And so we also are going to surrender, are we? We're going to surrender our gods. We're going to sacrifice our gods at the altar of science so that we can partake in its treasures, because I think that that is what has happened. I think that as soon as we really begin to believe, now what does it mean to believe? What does it mean to believe, right? What does it mean to believe? The first thing a man does for his beliefs is lie for them, right? It's lie for them, is to deceive himself for them. I forget who said that. So I think that what happens at the onset is that you have to completely jettison everything that you've held of value before this new monster god, which is science. And I think that the spirit of Africa is still wrestling with this idea, right? Is still wrestling with this idea that we're going to sacrifice the gods of our ancestors for this God who has proven his power over so many nations, right? And if you think about the world, right? Going back to Julian James, right? The bicameral mind. If we think about man all the way from inception through bicameralism, all the way to the present age, isn't that what it is, right? All the wars and all the unrest and all the strife, it is so that our gods may compete, and that the greatest of the gods will stand ultimately as worthy of our adulation, worship, and dread. And I think that the reason that Africa continues to suffer, when it also has been given this instrument of observation and record, that's all it is. You observe and you record. And the next man comes, the next man arrives, and then he also observes and he records. He observes and he records until ultimately you have amassed a body of knowledge that is actionable. But before you can do that, you need to bend the knee. You need to believe. You need to be baptized, right? You need to plunge into the waters of the Jordan and emerge a new man, right? And I don't think that Africa and the Africans have either been plunged, certainly not emerged.